Mm. See, see, see. Mm.
So good morning, everyone, and we are starting with the entire course on plant biotechnology, which has got different units. In fact, there are 4 units. And as you know that whenever you do a course, now what does a course mean? Anything which has more than 2 credits. So in MSc, each paper you will call it as a course, and in MSc, it is of 4 credits. So you are studying 4 papers. So you have 16 credits. But as I told you just now that you will be doing 2 extra papers. Plant physiology students will be doing from biotech, and biotech students will be doing from plant physiology. So you are doing 8 extra credits, which will mean a lot. Suppose you are progressing for higher studies or you are going to take up any other profession, then these knowledge will come handy. Now, when your MSc is a program, all right. So basically, if you are a postgraduate student, now it is also given on the website. After each program, there is a program outcome. That means what is expected if you are a PG student, at the end of the PG program, what you should gain in terms of knowledge and in terms of its application. So as a postgraduate student, depending on your avenues, say you can join a teaching profession, or you can go to a research institute, or you can join an industry. So there are different type of skill sets which you have to acquire. Now, when you study this paper, so the main course outcome which we are looking at is that you will learn about mass propagation of plants using in vitro techniques. And also, you know that the plants have array of chemicals, which we call as fine chemicals or secondary metabolites. And if you could have a system wherein these chemicals can be produced as and when required, in an industrial process, which we will call as a bioprocess. So that also you'll be learning. Now, at the end of this entire course, what we are expecting in terms of your learning outcome is that practically you should be able to perform. That means you must be able to make tissue culture medium, or you should be able to set up a laboratory, or you must be able to standardize a protocol for mass propagation of plants. And similarly, you can also have cell suspension cultures or plants which are capable of producing these metabolites as and when required in controlled environment condition. Now there is another very important aspect which you are going to learn is that you can have a low value precursor which can be converted into high value product by using a technique known as biotransformation. That means your catalyst is an entire cell or a cell aggregate which has all the enzyme machinery capable of carrying out multiple steps, and as a result a simple precursor will be converted into a value added product. Now this is looked upon by the industry with a great sense of optimism, because industry is looking at production of fine chemicals in large condition. Now this particular, that means the first session which I'm going to take today right now is basically the organization part as to what you will have in a tissue culture laboratory. Now here what we are going to learn is we are going to learn about micropropagation of plants which are used in the floricultural industry and those which are medicinally important. Now in today's concept, it is very meaningful because you know that the Prime Minister has sanctioned more than 6 crores for cultivation of medicinal plants. And if we need a large amount of planting material, then you definitely need a technology in place so that you can have mass production of plants. Now, then you will be also learning about when you're translating an in vitro system and you're taking it into the field, then what type of problems or challenges which are encountered. And then you're going to learn about a technique known as somaclonal variation. So today what we are going to learn is about the entire setup of a tissue culture lab, and then you're going to learn about how micropropagation is applied for floricultural and medicinal plant propagation. In the next session, I'm going to talk about, that means next week or so, I'm going to talk about another technique, that is embryogenesis. Now, it's very nice to know about the history of any technique. Please remember, plant tissue culture is not a separate branch of botany. It is only a technique, and that technique can be applied in many fields. I'm repeating, today at the end of this session, you're going to have a quiz, and that quiz will be based upon what I'm talking. So I'm going to test your listening skills. So please listen to what I say very carefully. Now, way back in 1900, very early, there was a German plant physiologist who proposed the concept of in vitro plant cell culture. In fact, he was the one who conceived the idea of totipotency. And he said that each and every cell has the required genetic information. As a result, given appropriate condition, these cells can then differentiate to form tissue and organs. That means if you had a proper environment condition, both physical and chemical, a plant cell can be cajoled to form an entire plant. And he was very optimistic in the sense that he used Radiskinsia plant and especially the mesophyll cells. See how intelligent he was. He thought because they contain chloroplast, it would be a good system to develop into an entire plant. However, he ignored one simple aspect, that is of asenic or aseptic condition. So Haberland was a German plant physiologist. So even though his experiments did not succeed, but it paved a way for a very big revolution. And you know that today plant tissue culture is a very important biotechnological tool which is used for mass propagation of many plants. Now, then along in the same period of time, Hanning thought that embryos are already defined. That means there is a predefined area, or you have an organization resulting in a stem and a root meristem. So as a result, getting entire plants will be very easy in an in vitro system. Then Colton Robbins, they successfully isolated root tips. See, look here, most of them are using meristematic tissue because they know that these are the cells which are capable of dividing, redividing, becoming permanent tissue, and then they can differentiate to form different organs of a plant. So Colton Robbins successfully grew isolated root tips which grew indefinitely. Meanwhile, Philip White, he developed a culture medium, initially added yeast, but then he replaced yeast with vitamin B for growing tomato root tips. Now, it is said that till today, these root cultures are being maintained in the laboratory. That means you can say that they are sort of immortal. Why immortal? Because they have been subcultured from the basic material after repeated, like you take a small piece of that root culture, subculture in a fresh medium, again you will get a profusion of roots, and again you cut them and you maintain them in that manner. So White, he added vitamin B in the culture, and he has been growing tomato roots. Now he is no more, so he was the first one, and on his name we have a culture medium known as White's medium. In 1939, Gothard, White, and Nabokov, they found that the cells in culture can be grown as an undifferentiated mass of tissue, which we now define as callus. Now, Overbeek, he added coconut milk because he saw that, what do you mean by coconut milk? The liquid endosperm. And he felt that if the embryos of coconut could grow in that, then definitely this supplement should enhance the differentiation of cells, and behold, he found that it was true. So in 1941, he added coconut milk to the culture medium. And today we call it as a medium constituent of an undefined nature, because each and every liquid endosperm will have a different composition. So as a result, there is no standardization. In 1944, it was Cook and Sui who proposed that for cell division, to be more precise, cell growth and bud proliferation, if you could add higher level of phosphates and adenine in presence of an auxin like IAA, then you could get good growth. Now it was Moir who separated the callus tissue and he raised them in liquid medium as cell suspension cultures. Skoog is given the credit of identifying a very important group of plant growth regulators, which we call as cytokinin, from the word cyto because they are involved in cell division. So Skoog and Miller discovered kinetin as a cell division hormone. They separated kinetin from DNA of a fish, herring, from the sperm. So it was a degraded DNA, and when they found that this degraded DNA was capable of initiating cell division in culture. Now you know that kinetin is nothing else but 6-perfluoroaminopurine. A very important natural cytokinin which is present in zeamase is known as zeatin. So zeatin is a naturally occurring cytokinin. So in 1957, Skoog and Miller gave the concept of hormonal control. That means if you could have a balance between auxin and cytokinin, you can sort of play around with the culture medium and you can get either roots or shoot or entire plant in vitro. Reinhardt and Stewart regenerated embryos from callus and cell suspension of carrot in 1959. So carrot continues to remain as a model system for somatic embryos because these embryos are developed from somatic cells and therefore you call it as somatic embryo. Now, the cells. So obviously, whenever you have a new system in place, you are also very interested in finding out how this new system is responding, and you are trying to, what you can say, experiment with it. So Cochrane, what he did was he used some macerating enzymes and some enzymes which are capable of breaking down the cell wall. As you know that the cell wall is mainly made up of cellulose and the cementing material is in the form of hemicellulose and pectin. So by using a combination of these cell wall degrading enzymes, you could get naked plant cells. And if you recall, later on, these naked plant cells are a very good model system or a very good tool for direct DNA uptake. So Cochrane was the one in 1960 who isolated a protoplast by enzymatic degradation of cell wall. Now these cells, again, you want them to regenerate. So protoplast regeneration means you require them to once again form cell wall, and we will talk about it little later as to what is the advantage of having a protoplast culture. So by filtering the cell suspension, you can get single similar to a microbial culture. So plants could be derived from one single cell. So you will get true to type or you will get what are known as clones. Now, the Indian scenario, especially the Delhi School of Plant Sciences, right now there are two campuses. One is the North Campus and one is the South Campus. So the North Campus had most of these plant tissue culture scientists used to visit there. So you had stalwarts like Maheshwari, Vasil, all of them contributing to a lot. And as you can see here, and you also have read the book on embryology by Bhojwani, and then you've read that original book by Maheshwari, because the entire work on embryogenesis, microsporogenesis, and embryogenesis, a lot of work has been done by Maheshwari and his students. So they developed test tube fertilization techniques. Now, the first breakthrough of commercial tissue culture was achieved by Morrell. So Morrell is, you can say that in terms of floriculture, for mass cultivation of orchids, Cymbidium is an orchid, and these orchids can be cultivated in large numbers by using the in vitro technique. I have a question for you all at this time. In orchids, how many seeds are there? Anybody can answer. How many seeds are there? Can anybody, or I will take names. Gayatri, can you give me an answer? In orchids, how many seeds are there?
Ma'am, infinite seeds are present in the plant.
How many?
Ma'am, many infinite.
Many. So because it belongs to microspermy. So orchids are also that way very promiscuous. See, you can breed orchids with any of these. So in terms of breeding, orchids also are a very good system. But in spite of their having many seeds, their seed germination requires a fungal partner or a mycorrhizal partner, then only they can germinate. As I told, the name microspermy, because the seeds are very small, they lack nutritive tissue. So endosperm is missing. So as a result, they will not be able to germinate directly. So in vitro system, they grow into what are known as protocorm-like bodies, PLBs. So protocorm-like bodies are produced, and as a result, if all of them germinate together, you get what is known as mass propagation. But the beauty is in vitro, instead of just producing one protocorm-like body, they produce many. You will be learning about it a little later. Now, Murashige and Skoog are two very good plant physiologists who made the recipe. They found out what the plant cells in isolation, or what the starting material in isolation, they will like it and they will flourish to form different organs of the plant. So in 1962, this is a popular I always say how we have dal chawal. Similarly, MS basal medium is the basic medium, which then there are permutation and combinations, and you get different types of media. Again, Maheshwari along with Guha in 1964, they developed haploid plants. You know that pollen grains have n number of chromosomes. So as a result, if pollen grains, they differentiate to form an entire plant, these plants will be haploid. Now, in 1966, Stewart demonstrated totipotency. See, the concept of totipotency was floated by Haberland. But to show that indeed plant cells, if provided the required condition, can differentiate to form an entire plant, was demonstrated by Stewart. Again, a model system using carrots. Now, please remember the cell theory. Anybody can tell me who proposed the cell theory? A guy who's there in the group, Somnath, will you be able to tell? Who proposed the cell theory? Anybody else? Pankaj, Atif, Naina, anyone? Did Gauri join or not yet? Taufik? What do you mean by cell theory?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Yeah, Gauri, do you know who proposed the cell theory?
मैम स्केल्डन एंड श्वान.
Yeah, Google search किया ना किसने?
नहीं मैम.
Okay, Schwann and Sheldon, right? So they both. Which country they belong to? Anybody?
Ma'am, that I don't know.
Okay, you can Google it then. Fine, good, Akansha. Schwann and Sheldon, they proposed the cell theory. Anyone can tell me what is the cell theory? The basic unit of life is the cell, right? So cell theory was proposed by Schwann and Sheldon. Commercialization of tissue culture was achieved by a company known as Pfizer, and they commercialized plant cell suspensions for production of secondary metabolites. And then they also, the person who was involved in the research, Rotten, he got the first patent. And in 1970, Power and his colleagues, they fused protoplast. So if you have protoplast fusion, you get what are known as somatic hybrids. And protoplasts are easy to fuse because they have only the plasma membrane. Now these are protoplast, as I told you earlier, Cocking was the one who isolated protoplast. Power and his colleagues, they fused protoplast. And then to regenerate protoplast from plants was done by Takebe and colleagues. And in interspecific hybrid, you know that in hybridization technique, you can have intra, that means they are compatible. But to get interspecific hybrid would take a long time, but this can be achieved by using protoplast fusion. So you can have a protoplast of two different species, and if you provide them with a fusogen, which again you will be studying a little later, then the protoplast will fuse and you will get a interspecific hybrid. So because Nicotiana tabacum belongs to family Solanaceae. Remember, the family Solanaceae is highly regenerative. So most of the experiments, if you can see in the early times, Nicotiana tabacum is also a model system for plant tissue culture because it is very amenable and it differentiates and it renders itself very easily to in vitro system. Now, I also mentioned that you can use these plant cells as enzyme machinery to, say, convert substrate A into a value-added product B. And that is known as biotransformation. You will be studying some very specific examples. Now, you know that there is a soil gram-negative pathogenic soil bacterium known as Agrobacterium tumefaciens. And this bacterium is a natural genetic engineer. So Chilton and his colleagues were the ones who used them as a system to transfer the tDNA from the Ti plasmid of Agrobacterium tumefaciens into plant cells. And they demonstrated that this could be a method for plant genetic engineering. Now in 1978, somatic cells of tomato and potato were hybridized to form a intergeneric hybrid, tomato, and this was achieved in vitro by Melchers and his colleague. You are going to study at length a topic on somaclonal variation. And the two scientists who coined the word somaclonal variation are Larkin and Snowcroft. So Larkin and Snowcroft, they coined the term somaclonal variation. Transgenic tobacco, again remember I told you tobacco is a model system for in vitro culture, and this transgenic tobacco was produced by Horsch and colleagues. Whenever you write Ital, it means that there are more scientists involved in the entire research project. There are two methods of gene transfer. One is artificial, the other one is natural. Agrobacterium is a natural method of gene transfer, and an artificial method is direct DNA uptake or liposome mediated. But you know that the most prevalent one is using a particle gun transformation or a ballistic gene gun or ballistic gene transfer method. And this was done by Klein and his colleagues in 1987. Now this is very interesting, and you're going to study entirely about how this production of chiconin was achieved by researcher, and you have a company associated with them, which is Mitsui Petrochemical Company. So as such, Shikonin production in vitro can be taken up as a case study. So what they did was they had a product, Shikonin, which has visual. That means you can select the cells because the compound is visually selectable. Second, it is an anthraquinone. It has antimicrobial activity, and this system was a very good system for a screening method and for scaling up. And the plant from which this plant belongs to family Boraginaceae, Lithospermum erythrorhizon, where the product is mainly in the root tissue. Now, ginseng, all of you know that ginseng definitely in today's context, it has more meaning because it is immunomodulator, it boosts your immune system, but it is also used in the cosmetic industry of its skin whitening agent. So ginsenoids are saponins and steroidal saponins, and they can be produced by ginseng cell cultures, Hibino and Ushiyama. When we talk about scaling up, we'll be again coming back to this, how you can have fine chemical production in vitro. And one example of success is again ginseng. Now, how do you set up a tissue culture lab? Now, as PG students, you may get an opportunity to work in a plant tissue culture laboratory. You will be actually performing the experiment. Each one of you will be culturing at least one plant. And I'm very sure we are going to go back into the laboratory. But how do you set up? How do you plan? And for a small scale, how you can plan? And for a large scale, how you can plan? My one important hint to all of you is that whenever you have a laboratory setup, it should be in a production line. And you have to use some quality tools. One such tool is called as 5S. You can go and look up more detail, but 5S means you sort the things. You keep it nicely. You don't go and search for it at the last moment. So everything should be handy to it. Again, you find out what, replenish it. Whenever, say, suppose your chemicals are over, then you have to replenish whatever chemical is needed. And very important, your lab record should be very good, because sometimes when you're making media, you forget if you have added something or you have not added, because you are not used to writing it down in your laboratory book. So your storage facility should be very well planned. The chemicals should be alphabetically labeled. The solid chemicals or the chemicals which are hygroscopic, there are what you can say instructions which are available how they should be stored. The liquid chemicals have to be stored separately. The refrigerator should be cleaned and it should be maintained. You cannot have contaminants being thrown around. Your washing area, we'll be looking at each of these areas separately. The area for media preparation, your autoclave, then your microwave oven, because nowadays you dissolve agar using a microwave. So that microwave cannot be used for food. You must have a separate refrigerator. You must have a separate microwave only for your laboratory work. Then what are the medium constituents? Then your inoculation area, your growth room, transfer area, and finally the survival of these in vitro plants in field condition, which we call as acclimatization. See, when we talk about micropropagation, we are going to also revise many of these once again. Now, I'm going to take you into a literally virtual tour around some of these things. Now, look at the forceps. They are of stainless steel and they are coming in different sizes. The reason being that, why they are of different size? See, because you have a test tube. The 60 ml test tube. If you want to inoculate, then your hand should not touch the rim of the test tube. So as a result, you need a very good tip to hold the explant material, and without touching the media, you have to just place it on the culture media. These are with blunt ends, and this is again for cutting your explant, and this blade which you are using is a disposable blade. So if you're going to inoculate or you're going to cut the plant material, then you are going to use this type of scalpel. And you can sterilize all these using a dry or a wet sterilization technique. Now, the petri dishes, they come in either disposable, like you can use it one time or throw it away, or they are stacked, or they are made up of a smaller and a larger one which fit with each other. Then usually for seed sterilization, you use a filter paper which you can place in this area so that when you're sterilizing. Now, care should be taken that if you're doing wet sterilization, entire exercise will become futile. So it's a good idea to wrap them up either in a newspaper or in an aluminium foil, or put it in a stainless steel box and then put it in the autoclave. Now, there are different type of culture vessels or containers which can be used depending upon your application. Suppose you are going to have mass propagation, then you cannot be working with these small test tubes, because in this small test tube, media becomes a limiting factor. At the same time, aeration also becomes the limiting factor. So you use jam bottles of different sizes, and purposely I've shown this inner side. You can see the grooves which are present so that it will fit properly. Now these magenta boxes, I'm going to talk about them a little later in greater detail when I talk about photoautotrophic cultures. So these magenta boxes also come with some air filters which can be fitted, and I'll be talking a little more in detail when I talk about photoautotrophic cultures. Now aluminium foil, and this is very important, known as a parafilm. Now what is a parafilm? It's a semi-transparent, flexible film composed of blend of waxes and polyolefins. See, you cannot put a parafilm and then sterilize. It's going to melt and stick to the container. So normally when you are inoculating a material, say you have inoculated on a petri plate, then you seal the petri plate using a parafilm. So parafilm comes again in different sizes, and it is made up of waxes and it is made up of polyolefins. Now, why is it called as parafilm? You are going to study an entire chapter on IPR. So in IPR, there is something called a trademark. Trademark, I give this example, champagne is a trademark, which only the French company, you may be making a similar wine, but you cannot use that name. So parafilm is a trademark of a company known as Bemis. So Bemis company owns this trademark. So if you are going to make something like, which has an application like parafilm, you cannot call it as parafilm, because otherwise you are infringing the proprietary rights, because that name is owned by Bemis company. Now micropipette. I have purposely shown this. Mouth pipetting is totally not allowed. There are retrievers which are available, so you can use retrievers, and by using retriever, you can aspirate whatever liquid you want to take. But the pipettes also come with these rubber bulbs, and these rubber bulbs can be used for aspirating the liquid. Whenever the volume is less, then you use what are known as micro pipettes. You will be trained how to use the micro pipette. So micro pipettes come in fixed volume, or they can come in variable volumes. Normally, whenever you have a volume of 1 ml and less than that, so you have in microliters, you use a micro pipette. But you can also use it for large volumes. As you can see, there are tips which come in different volumes. So you can have a micro pipette of say 5 ml, where the tip will be larger. In India, we do reuse, which is in a way good that we reuse the tips because there are tip boxes which are available and they can be auto-cleaned. So the tips have to be sterilized before they are used, especially when you are doing any work in microbiology. There is a method of cleaning the glass test tubes. Normally you clean them with mild alkali, and this is a type of container. So what you have is there is water flowing in and coming out. So this ensures total cleaning of the pipettes from their inner side. So you don't have a pipette which is clean only from outside. And normally you should never use a pipette, or rather you should not aspirate any liquid because it can be dangerous when you do mouth pipetting. There are 3 types of sterilization techniques, as you know, and normally the culture vessels and containers, they are sterilized using dry sterilization in an oven. So glasswares and test tubes and other things can be done by dry sterilization. When you use an autoclave, you call it as a wet or a steam sterilization. So now you can compare this autoclave with your pressure cooker. So your pressure cooker has a whistle, right? And today you go home, on the whistle, there is something written, and that is the pressure. So 15 pounds per square inch. And these are the knobs by means of which you ensure that it is properly closed. So inside there is a gasket to make the entire thing airtight. Then upper lid is armored so that if there is any pressure built up, there won't be any outward, what you can say, accident. There's a large volume, there's a small volume, but in principle both are same. Inside there is an electrical coil. Word of caution, you should never have an autoclave on without any water. It will burn the coil and the experiment is over. So it should immerse in water, because the steam which is generated brings about the sterilization of material, disinfection or sterilization. All media is sterilized by using wet sterilization. And you can see there's a pressure gauge on which you can see the pressure. When it reaches 15, then you allow it to run for another 15 to 20 minutes to get complete sterilization. Then you have to cool down properly, because if you want to go, you're going to open it, it will not open because of the steam which is trapped inside. So you will not be able to open it and it will cause an accident. So you have to allow it to cool completely and then only take out the culture medium. Again, a word of caution here. When you remove the culture medium, let it sit there for some time and then you remove it. Like you can't let it come to room temperature. Otherwise, if you bring it outside immediately, there will be a lot of ambient air moving around it, and as a result, your media may get contaminated. Now, if any material is thermolabile, you'll be studying, there are certain media constituents like some amino acids or some plant growth regulators, which you cannot sterilize using in dry or wet sterilization. They have to be sterilized using a technique known as filter sterilization. So when it is small volume, say you are going to add only few ml of PGR, then you use a syringe. Here, of course, I've shown a larger syringe, but you can get smaller syringe also. And these are cassettes in which there are membranes. So these membranes are made up of different materials. They can be a cellulose acetate, they can be nylon, they can be Teflon. So depending on the type of what you are trying to filter, sterilize. You can also filter sterilize, especially if you have animal cell culture where most of the media constituents are thermolabile. Then you use an ultra filtration unit. Now here, see, as you can see, there's an upper cup and this is the medium portion on which the membrane filter is placed. And this is attached to it, and you can see there's a very big holder here. Whenever you are pouring liquid over this membrane, it is not going to move easily. Why? Because the size of the filter, or the pore size, is 0.45 microns or 0.22 microns. So with this small pore size, obviously, when you are trying to get a pyrogen-free medium, inside you want to get rid of all particulate matter which are lesser than that. So as a result, what will happen is you will require to have a pressure. So here what is shown is a vacuum pump. So when you are applying vacuum, obviously with the help of vacuum, the medium will be filter sterilized. Now similar filters, these are large ones, right? So they are known as air filters. So you can also filter air so that you get filter sterilized air, and this is used when you are scaling up or in a bioreactor system. So in a bioreactor, for the inlet or air inlet, you will be using a filter of this type, and with a large capacity bioreactor, there are larger filters. Nevertheless, the take-home message is they are membrane filters which will filter the particulate matter, and only pyrogen-free air will come out to aerate the contents in the bioreactor. Then you have balances of different size. Another very, very important thing. You must always use a spatula whenever you are taking out chemicals from the container. Then you should not use the same spatula. Spatula should be totally dry. Then you get something called as weighing boards. You cannot use paper. And using balance is also a very important technique. Your balance should be completely clean. You must clean the balance, stir it, and you use a balance. Whenever you are weighing material which is in gram, you use a electronic balance of this type, and when you are weighing in milligram, you use a precision balance. Where will you place the balance? It should be a tabletop which is properly balanced. Okay, so you must ensure that there is no vibration whenever you are using a balance, and the peripheral region of the balance should also be kept very clean. Now these are the different necessary. How do you mix the media constituent? You are using a magnetic stir, and these are known as the stir bars. So in the beaker or wherever you are mixing the media constituents, you will be putting it on a magnetic stirrer and using a magnetic stir bar. Now the pH of the medium is very important, which is the medium as such has a very low buffering capacity. So as a result, the pH of the medium has to be adjusted using a pH meter. Now a pen type pH meter can also be used, or a conventional combination electrode type of pH medium can also be used. Standard operating systems are always mentioned. So you have to calibrate any instrument before it is being used. This I just put up for you to know that what do you mean by acidic, basic, and neutral pH, ranging from this is a way, but normally your working pH will be somewhere in the middle, not two extremes. But lemon juice, orange juice, even though here they are acidic, but they are alkaline food, because once they go into your system, they are alkaline food. And distilled water should be 7 pH, but it can be a little less or slightly more. The water which is used for making the culture is a deionized water. And there are many companies, we have put up only Milliq because they have ion exchangers, they have a pre-guard system which will remove the particulate matter and odor. Then there are ion exchangers, and then you get filter sterilized. You can get even HPLC grade water. Now, when you are preparing the media, as I said, your lab book should be in proper place. Everything that you need should be available, and you must be wearing a lab coat. Now, these are borosilicate test tubes which are rimless. Why they are rimless? So that the chances, there is almost nil chance of being contamination near the rim area. And the amount of media which you normally use, say 60 ml, then you use 25 ml or maximum 30 ml of media, because this air gap is important. It is going to provide with the required aeration for the growing culture. Now what I've shown here is a straight medium. Later on I'll show some explant material. If you keep it in an angle, then you get a slant medium. The gelling material being used is agar. We'll be talking about it a little later. This transfer area is also very important, a laminar airflow. Now, a laminar airflow, they are of two types. They can be either vertical or they can be horizontal, depending on the direction of airflow. The filter which is used in a laminar airflow is known as a HEPA filter, HEPA, high efficiency particulate air. It removes all the particles and microorganisms, usually 0.3 micron in size. So when the air passes through these filters, anything which is below 0.3 micron will be, above 0.3 micron will be trapped. So for you, a question, people are using those N9 masks, right? Yes or no? Are you sleeping? Are you awake? I should be asking that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So you know HEPA filter, what they are using?
Yes.
हाँ? क्या है? N9 में क्या रहता है? अच्छा, कोरोना वायरस का साइज क्या है? What, any idea what is the size of bacteria size, what it is? What is the size of bacteria? Size of bacteria, you can search 0.2 to 3 microns. All right. And coronavirus is 0.125 microns. So your filter, but they are mainly passed through droplets. So it is like a barrier. Is that clear? The size of coronavirus is around 0.125 microns. So here what you have is you have pressurized air. So initially in the laminar airflow, there is a filter which will take care of dust, mites and particulate, larger particles. And then that air passes through this HEPA filter which will trap bacteria and other mold. So you get unidirectional flow of sterile air. So the area in this bench is sterile. So if you have seen some good operation theaters, they also have sterile rooms, or that entire area is filter sterilized, and usually it is of class 100. So class 100 HEPA filters are used. So as you can see, this working bench, and to show how you should place, and as far as possible your handling, you must not put your head inside that laminar airflow. Your head should be outside. So your transfer area should be totally aseptic transfer area. A plant tissue culture lab can be designed using a slotted angle rack, and the distance between your culture vessel and the tube lights. Usually light is supplied by cool fluorescent lamp, because tungsten lamp will generate heat. Therefore you use tube lights which are cool and fluorescent. The spectrum is similar to sunlight. So in a way you are simulating or you're mimicking natural light. And normally it is about 1 feet the distance, and you get adequate illumination, and all these are hooked onto a timer so that you can set the photo period. Normally the photo period is 16 hours of light and 8 hours of darkness. Something similar to what you get in within a what you can say in normal days. Now tissue culture plant, we are going to talk in detail about this acclimatization. They are in a very, very comfortable condition, but they have to be transferred into field conditions. So there is an entire process known as acclimatization. And this acclimatization at the lab level can be done using simple protocols where you can maintain humidity, or if you have facility of a greenhouse, either a shade net or a very sophisticated greenhouse, which are constructed to provide the required environmental condition. We are going to talk about this because there's an entire, what you can say, not unit, a little chapter on acclimatization. Now, what does a tissue culture medium contain? Now, because the plant cells or explant material is growing in isolation, you have to provide everything. The type of nutrition, if I have to say just in one word, is heterotrophic, even though it is plant. Why? You are providing ready-made media. And in an entire plant, there is division of labor. You have the root system taking up minerals, waters, and then translocating it to the other parts of the plant. Then you have the leaves, which are the main area for photosynthesis. They synthesize the organic food and then translocate it through phloem to different parts of the plant. But when you're growing cells, tissue, or organ in isolation, you have to provide everything in the medium. I told you Morashige and Skoog in 1962 were the first plant physiologists to define the various constituents of a medium. Now, these media constituents can be of two types. They can be either, you can say, the ones which are needed in large amount known as the macronutrients, or the ones which are needed in small amounts, that is the micronutrient. Nevertheless, remember, both are essential, because some people call one as essential and the other one as non-essential. Wrong. Both are equally essential for proper development of any plant or any tissue or any cell. So you call them as macro and micronutrient. Inorganic salts. Then organic nutrients, amino acids, very, very important plant growth regulators. The source of carbon, which is usually sucrose, but other carbon sources like glucose, fructose have also been used. Gelling agents, normally it is agar, but to cut on cost, people have also used other gelling agents like your starch from any plant material, or a starch or a polysaccharide, which is of lower cost. Then you have tissue culture supplements, which I told you, one of undefined nature, one I already mentioned, coconut water. Now the macronutrients, as you know, each and every of these elements, I told you background study, you must study about mineral nutrition, right? So in the beginning, when they grew isolated roots, the main area that they were studying is uptake of different minerals, wherein radio-labeled inorganic salts were added, and then they tried to find out how they were taken up by the roots. Now we have come a long way that we know that each of these nutrients, they play a very important role in the plant life cycle. Very simple, nitrogen is an important component of the chlorophyll molecule. It is also important component of all nucleic acids. It's also important components of the amino acids. So nitrogen becomes a very, very important macronutrient. Obviously, deficiency symptom, chlorosis is the most obvious deficiency symptom. Those of you who have been doing a little bit of farming or you're interested in growing plants, you know that whenever you add, you require what you can say fertilizer, and you say you give fertilizer in the form of urea. So what you're giving, nothing else but nitrogen. Now nitrogen is available in the atmosphere, but it cannot be taken up by any plant directly. It has to be fixed. So nitrogen should be supplied either in the form of a nitrate or in the form of ammonium salts. Reduced form of nitrogen is more easily taken up. which you will see when you see the media constituent. Similarly, potassium, calcium, obviously, signal transduction, cell wall component, calcium. Magnesium, activator of many enzymes, important component of chlorophyll molecule. Sulfur, amino acids, you have sulfur. Phosphorus, nucleic acids, important component. Iron is very, very important nutrient, but iron cannot be taken up as it is, so usually it is supplied in a chelated form. There are many micronutrients, that means nutrients which are required in small concentrations because they are important metal activators of different enzymes. Zinc, molybdenum, if you remember, enzymes of nitrogen metabolism, they require molybdenum. Boron, transport of sucrose. Copper, hexokinase. Manganese, also required in many enzymes, activation of enzymes. Then you have organic nutrients which are in the form of vitamins. Just make that correction, vitamin. Vitamin B1, thiamine, then B3 is niacin, B6 is pyridoxine, B complex, myoinositol is also considered as a growth stimulator. Now, some amino acids are like glycine are required in certain culture media. So some plants require glycine for their growth, for their differentiation and growth. Supplements of undefined nature are like tomato juice, then yeast extract, coconut milk, casein hydrolysate, or maize extract. However, there is a tendency to avoid these supplements because, as I mentioned, they are of undefined nature. Carbon source is usually sucrose at a level of 3%, but other carbon sources like glucose, fructose, maltose, galactose can also be used. Now we come to a very important part, that is plant growth regulator. We'll be talking a little bit more in detail in the next part, are auxins. So indole acetic acid, naphthalene acetic acid, naphthoxy acetic acid, 2,4-dichlorophenoxy acetic acid, a strong inhibitor of morphogenesis. That means if you require callus, then you need to add 2,4-D in the medium. 2,4,5-trichlorophenolic acetic acid. Then rooting hormone, indole butyric acid. Now all these auxins, cytokinins, gibberellins, they are prepared in ppm concentration. That means parts per million. 1 milligram in a liter. So when you are going to make 1 liter of culture medium, you are not going to sit and weigh 1 milligram. You will make a stock solution. So how will be a stock solution? 10 milligram per 10 ml. Remember, I'm going to give you a small assignment based on this. Cytokinin, I told you zeatin is a naturally occurring cytokinin. Now, both auxin and cytokinin cannot dissolve in water as such. Auxins usually require lukewarm water or they require a mild alkali. Cytokinins also can dissolve in mild alkali. Gibberellin require 50% ethanol, then only they will dissolve. Now I've written a term called co-autoclavable. That means you can add in the culture medium as it is and autoclave the culture medium. But if it is not co-autoclavable, that means it will break down. If you autoclave it, then what you have to do after you have made the medium, you have to add the PGR using filter sterilization. Can you tell me how do you do filter sterilization? How do you do filter sterilization? Bachalo? Anybody? I taught you. What do you use? What do you use for filter sterilization?
Nylon filter.
हाँ, yeah. क्या use करते हैं? Membrane, ना?
Yes.
Membrane
Nylon.
filters. What is this thing of your membrane size? 0.45 microns, isn't it? Yes or no? Other PGRs which you can use are ethylene, abscisic acid, etc. Again, I repeat, the PGRs are used in concentration of parts per million. Now the gelling agent is agar. Can anyone tell me from where you get agar? Yes? Atif, from where do you
Red
get
algae.
red algae? Can you tell me name of one red algae? Sonal, name of one red algae from which you get agar?
Rhodophyta family.
Red algae is Rhodophyta by darling. But I told you one name.
Family.
नहीं family नहीं चाहिए मेरे को. नाम चाहिए कोई भी red algae का. Anybody in the class?
Gracilaria.
Gracilaria.
Good, good. One very big round for that person.
And me.
Who's me? You have to tell your name. Abhijit, very good. Sadaf, can you tell one red algae from which you get agar? Gelidium. Gelidium and Gracilaria are two algae, red algae from where you get agar. Agar is a polysaccharide, and when you boil and cool agar, it will solidify. It is biologically inert. That means it does not provide with any nutrition. It can only hold water. But you can have a better gelling agent called Gelrite, which forms a very good, it's transparent in nature. It is what you can say, you require it in less amount, 0.1 to 0.2%, and you get a very nice gel. You adjust the pH of medium before adding agar. So pH is adjusted to either 5.5 to 5.7. You can use anywhere between 1 normal to 0.1 normal, alkali or acid. Now, when you prepare the medium, you need not remember, but you should know. You never weigh each and everything separately. They are all made in stock solutions. So what do you call the stock solutions? Macronutrient, micronutrient, vitamins, iron, PGR, and then sucrose. So when you prepare media, you have to take out required concentration of each one of them, dilute it using water, deionized water. Then you add sucrose, you adjust the pH, and then you add agar. You boil the media to dissolve agar, and then you can pour in the containers and sterilize it in an autoclave 20 minutes at 120 degrees centigrade and 15 pounds per square inch pressure. You have to cool and keep it in a sterile area, preferably under a laminar airflow. Now this is a recipe. Now please remember, you don't have to by heart, but you should at least know what it is. Now, for stock solution, how you're making all the major salts together. Look at Murashige and Skoog. How is nitrate supplied? In the form of ammonium and nitrate. Ammonium nitrate, potassium nitrate. So maximum is nitrate, nitrogen, which is being added. So nitrogen is added both in the form of ammonium salt and nitrate. So you have ammonium nitrate and potassium nitrate. Then calcium chloride, magnesium sulfate. So it will provide both magnesium and sulfur. Then potassium dihydrogen phosphate. So that will provide with phosphorus and potassium. Now what is the 20x? Because you are preparing a concentrated solution. If I were to give you a very crude example, हम लोग syrup बनाते हैं ना, correct? So you make a concentrated solution and then you dilute it as per your requirement. So that final concentration जो लिखा हुआ है ना, how much you need in the culture medium, say 1650 milligram per liter. So you have made a 20x solution. So you will be mixing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these macronutrients, and you will be making a stock solution. So when you make a stock solution, you can store it in a refrigerator. So normally you make a 1 liter stock solution so that you can make a media 4 or 5 times. But whenever you are taking the stock solution, you have to ensure that it is without any contamination. You're not sterilizing the stock solution. Are you people understanding what I'm talking? Yes or no? अरे आंसर करो.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. तो तुम्हारा stock solution क्या है? Concentrated है. कितना? 20x it is. Correct? So if you're going to take 1 liter, make 1 liter of culture medium, then you are going to take 50 ml of that stock. उस stock में क्या है? Ammonium nitrate है, potassium nitrate है, calcium chloride है, magnesium sulfate है, and potassium dihydrogen phosphate. So you have made stock solution containing all these salts and milligram that is given there in a liter. So you made 1 liter of stock solution which is of 20x concentration. Have you followed? Then minor salts kya hai? You want iodine, so potassium iodide. You want boron, boric acid. Then you want manganese, manganese sulfate. Then zinc sulfate, molybdenum, copper, cobalt. So all these are very essential, but they are required in lesser amount. So kitna liya tumne? 200x liya na concentration. So you will be taking only 5 ml per liter. Then iron, it is in a chelated form. So you have FeEDTA, which is prepared, and again 200x, and you will take 5 ml to prepare 1 liter of culture medium. Then there are different vitamins, as I already mentioned, again 200x. So you will take 5 ml to prepare the culture medium. And the various vitamins which are there: myoinositol, nicotinic acid, pyridoxine HCl, thiamine hydrochloride, glycine is amino acid, and biotin. Now please remember, this recipe is of Murashige and Skoog's medium. There are different culture mediums which are being proposed, and a plant tissue may respond well to different culture medium. However, all culture medium will contain macronutrients, micronutrient, iron, vitamins, and source of carbon. Proportion will vary. Some of the culture medium which you can remember are Gamborge, B5 medium, White's medium, then Biasin and Vent, Woody plant medium, WPM, Niche and Niche. These are other medium. But the medium which are shown here is Murashige and Skoog's medium. So if I have to prepare, like in the laboratory, you're going to make 1000 ml medium. Then you will take that 20x stock, 50 ml macro. Then if you have made 200x stock micro, you'll take 5 ml, vitamin 5, iron 5, sucrose 30. But remember, depending upon your, suppose you made 10x macronutrient, तो कितना लोगे तुम लोग? कितना ml लोगे? कोई भी जन, एक जन बताओ. हाँ, suppose तुमने लिया, बताओ. But anybody fast? You have to answer me. अभी ये 20x है तो 50 ml लिया ना, 10x है तो dilute है तो कितना लोगे? अरे
25.
अरे भगवान, तो कम लेगा कि ज्यादा लेगा?
ज्यादा 100 ml. 100.
हाँ, सिंपल. अभी तुम लोग को समझ में आया कि नहीं?
हाँ.
100x होगा तो कितना लोगे? 10 ml लोगे. माइक्रो माइक्रोन्यूट्रिएंट अगर 100x हुआ तो ज्यादा लेना पड़ेगा ना तुमको.
हाँ 10 ml.
हाँ. Have you followed? Anybody? Arey, come on now, answer. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
You are making a concentrated stock.
Yes, ma'am.
So suppose I make, okay, now if I say 1 liter, I need 1 ppm of PGR. My working solution is 10 milligram per ml. That means 1 ml contains 1 milligram. तो कितना ऐड करोगे? कितना ऐड करोगे बताओ? How much ml of PGR you will add in the culture medium? How much ml you'll add? Yes? Very simple. Did you understand my question? Yes or no? I said I've given you a stock solution of plant growth regulator, which is 10 milligram in 10 ml. That means 1 ml contains 1 milligram. I asked you a question that if I'm going to make 1 liter of culture medium and I need 1 ppm, very simple, I'm asking 1 ppm of PGR, then how much I'm adding? Gayatri?
1 gram.
1 gram?
1 gram.
1 mg, 1 mg per liter is 1 ppm. Isn't it? इसलिए मैंने कहा नोटबुक लेके बैठो. तुम्हारा स्टॉक सोल्यूशन क्या है? 10 milligram in 10 ml. So 1 ml contains how much?
1.
How much? 10 ml में 10 मिलीग्राम है, तो 1 ml में कितना है?
1
हाँ, 1 ml. Correct. तो 1 ppm is how much? 1 milligram in 1000. तो इसमें कितना डालोगे? 1 ml डालोगे ना?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm coming to the end now. After this, you will be having the quiz, listening quiz. Okay. Before I start with the second one. So these are the terms which are being used: aseptic or asenic techniques, autoclave, callus, cell suspension, clonal propagation, clones, contamination. If you're going to preserve it at very, very low temperature using liquid nitrogen, cryopreservation, starting material explant, plant growth regulator, inner test tube in vitro, outside in vivo, laminar airflow hood, then culture medium, then meristem cultures, organogenesis, we'll be talking about it more, regeneration, somatic embryo, totipotency. All right. So, DB sir. I'm going to request DB to give the quiz. Sir, 10 minute का इनको quiz है.
ठीक है. DB
DB भेजेगा quiz, देती हूँ मैं. आप रिकॉर्डिंग बंद कर दीजिए, तो let them do the quiz. So welcome back, and now we are going to start with the application part of it. As the name is suggestive, micropropagation means mass propagation using small starting material. So when the name is suggestive, micro means very small. So any plant material can be used, as I told you in the beginning, that plants are totipotent in nature. So given appropriate condition, they will be able to divide, redivide, differentiate, and result in plant. So this practice of mass multiplying the stock material is known as micropropagation. And plant cells are totipotent, and this concept of totipotency was floated by German physiologist Haberland. Now, the ability of plant organs to grow in vitro given suitable conditions is known as micropropagation. Now, these plantlets can be obtained directly as a result of meristematic growth, or they can be through an intermittent callus phase. Now, sometimes the callus may differentiate to form embryo-like structures in vitro, which are known as somatic embryos, and somatic embryos will regenerate to form entire plants. Now we quickly, we are not going to go into more of the history because we already spoke about it. So we once again give credit to the great person, Haberland, who thought of this mass propagating or rather in vitro culture of plants using the technique of tissue culture. Now, callus cultures were established by White, embryo cultures by Hanning, and Wendt. If you remember, the first person to discover indole acetic acid as a growth regulator is Wendt, and his very famous experiment of decapitated coleoptile seedlings, if you recall, using auxin, keeping auxin on that agar block and then keeping that block on decapitated seedlings and seeing whether it is showing photoperiodism or not. But Wendt was the one to purify auxin, and he called it as indole 3 acetic acid. Now, Miller and Skoog are given the credit of discovering the very famous cell division promoting plant growth regulator called as cytokinin, and Morel is the one who established mass propagation of orchid, example Cymbidium, using tissue culture technique. Murashige and Skoog for formulating or giving us an excellent recipe for in vitro propagation of plants. Now, floriculture is not only flowers. Please remember all the accessories which grow along with it. So especially the foliage leaves. So you require a large amount of foliage leaves which can be mass propagated using the floricultural technique. Now, floriculture is a very big industry in a country like India because India is bestowed with all the 3 seasons, and it has the best meteorological conditions, labor being cheap, and you have a large amount of flowers which can be grown in different seasons and in different part of the country. And as a result, floriculture becomes a very big industry in our country. It is often said that from birth till the end of your life, flowers are very important components of your life. Many of these foliage plants, whether they are aglaonemas or pothos or they are dracaenas, many of them are naturally vegetatively propagated. So plants which are vegetatively propagated can also, or rather I can say that they are more amenable for mass propagation using the tissue culture technique. So vegetative propagation is either, there are so many techniques which are involved there. You can have underground vegetative parts, which are modified stem, roots, or they are vegetative plant parts like runners, suckers, offsets, or even in leaves. If they are used for propagation, then all these will result in genetically identical individuals known as clones. So clones are genetically identical individual. I give a very good example for you, that is banana. So in case of banana, you must have seen that under that large banana tree, there are small plantlets which come up. How do they come up? From that underground root stalk or the rhizomatous part which is present underground, and from that this modified stem gives rise to propagules, and as a result these propagules then develop into a large tree. Now for in vitro technique, now many farmers, they use tissue cultured plant as a starting material for their banana cultivation. The reason being that already you have a sizable size of the plantlet which is obtained, and in nature you may get just one sapling from that underground vegetative part, 1 or 2, but in vitro system, depending upon the subcultures that are made, you can get large number of plants. So you can see beautiful tulips. Now Dutch or Netherlands was the main area for floriculture, but with labor being very expensive, they started outsourcing this industry to countries like Thailand, India. Thailand is still the hub for orchids. So they have like a cooperative society where each and every household, they grow orchids, and the method of propagating these orchids is by tissue culture technique. Because you can get large number of plants and then they are hardened and then given to these households where they grow, and these when they start flowering, again the main owners, they buy it back and do the remaining process so that it becomes an export oriented unit. You can see beautiful anthuriums. Now anthuriums are propagated from leaf segments. So leaf segments, when grown in vitro cultures, they give rise to small plantlets or other mass propagation of these plants. Now, what are the different stages of micropropagation? Now, different books will give you various definitions, but normally the standard definition would be your explant selection. What is explant? Your starting material is known as an explant. I'll be telling you what can be used as an explant. Then stage 1 is your establishment of the explant. See, you are removing the plant material from the mother plant or from germinating seeds, and you are subjecting it to large amount of hardships, like you're going to surface sterilize it, and then you are going to handle it, place it alone on a culture medium. So definitely it's not going to like it. So as a result, what will happen is, if it doesn't like the new condition and it is not comfortable, it is going to turn brown, or it will become necrotic, or there'll be leachates, there can be contamination, and as a result, the explant may not survive. That means there is failure during stage 0. Stage 0 becomes very important for your, what you can say, your practical application of micropropagation. Now, if they have established, they'll remain green in color. So they may show some amount of expansion, or they may show some callus formation, or in some cases, depending on the plant material, they may start showing response in the form of an organ. So organogenesis means formation of organ, either say roots, or it can be in the form of shoots. But when you get both roots and shoot, then you call it as regeneration. So regeneration means formation of roots and shoots. Now here you have just one, but you want to mass propagate. So as a result, you want this to be multiplied, or you want it to proliferate. So stage 2 is the proliferation stage, that is shoot multiplication. You can repeat this stage depending upon how many you want, or how many plantlets you want at the end of the entire, what you can say, a micropropagation period. So this stage 2 can be repeated at intervals so that you get a large number of plantlets as a result of micropropagation. Now for these plants to survive very well, they must have good root system. And a good taproot system is advantageous, but in all these cases, the roots are arising from other parts of the plant, or you are calling them as adventitious roots. Adventitious roots do not have that strength like the main root, that is the taproot system. Now, in an in vitro culture, the type of nutrition is heterotrophic, and if you want the plants to survive in field condition, they must grow, they must change from heterotrophic mode of nutrition to a phototrophic mode of nutrition. That means they have to be hardened, and this hardening is known as acclimatization. So we will be studying each of these stages separately and how these stages have their own challenges. Now, explant selection. Now, before explant selection, your mother plant, what you will be choosing is again important. So, mother plant should be an elite variety. That means the variety which you want to mass propagate. So in a floricultural condition, it can be color, it can be size of the flower or the variegations which are there in the leaf, whatever it is. So your selection of mother plant is very, very important. And the mother plant should also be a healthy mother plant. Now your explant, you can choose either from a field grown plant, or you can germinate seeds and then you can obtain what you can say, the explant from it. If you want to grow virus-free plants, then you use the meristematic tissue. For obvious reason, the meristematic tissue, the cells or other in the meristematic region, especially the apical, they lack any conducting tissue like xylem or anything. So most of the viruses, they are mainly translocated or they are transported via through these vessels, and because the meristem region does not have it, usually the meristematic region is free of any endogenous contaminants, especially viruses. So if you want a virus-free plant, then you need to grow apical meristem. That is the ideal explant material. Meristems are also present in axillary bud. So you have apical bud or the axillary bud, which is meristematic tissue. How will you identify meristematic tissue? Very simple, because they have large nucleus, they are filled with cytoplasm, vacuole is small, few in number, as contrast to permanent tissue where vacuole occupies a major portion within the cell and the nucleus is shifted to one side. So meristematic cells are compact. They have a prominent nucleus because they are still dividing, and these are the ones which will be differentiating into different tissue, organ and organs of the plant. So explant can be any of these meristematic regions, apical or axillary. It can be leaf, it can be cotyledons. The cotyledons also give very good results. Or it can be any of the essential floral appendages, like it can be the petals, it can be sepal, it can be anther, it can be ovule, it can be even the stigma or the style. So in brief, you can say just about anything can be used as an explant material. However, it will depend upon the plant which is a suitable explant material. So when you are standardizing any protocol, standardizing the source and standardizing the explant is also an important practical aspect. Now, why you need to micropropagate? You don't have to do micropropagation just for the sake of doing it. There has to be reason behind it. You want large number of genetically identical material, or you want a quick method of what you can see, improving the quality of the plantlets. Then, or you want to carry out experiment on genetic transformation, then you are going to use these techniques. So factors in the medicinal plants, if they have to be grown in large numbers, then your starting material or your saplings or the seedlings should be available. So good planting material can be made available. Or horticultural, either it can be a fruit crop, floricultural industry, flowers, then commercial application like for production of large number of shoots, say essential oils if you want, then you can grow shoots in bioreactors. Then those which are threatened species, you can conserve them and you can propagate them, bring them back to nature, so that you have, whenever endangered plants are there, then you resort to this technique so that you can conserve the plants. In addition to that, for doing some basic studies also, in vitro cultures become easy. In mass afforestation program, silviculture, at that time also you can use the technique of mass propagation of plants using in vitro cultures. Now this is, I'm going to stop after this and give you the one more quiz again and take it next. Can be any part of the plant. So in definition, when I say totipotently, any part of the plant is suitable for in vitro culture. But at the same time, ideal material will depend upon the type of plant which you are trying to grow. So I've given you some example, like which I already mentioned: meristematic buds, leaf, floral appendages, seed, and embryo. So टाइम कर रही है, इसमें से करती हो, उसको अभी क्विज देने का है. So can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear or no?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm going to stop here with this presentation, and I'm going to send you a quiz again, 10 minutes.
Oh.
Are you ready? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay. Just 1 minute, I'm standing. So I'm going to send you 10 minutes it is. It's 12:05, correct? Yes or no? Girls and boys.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you got the quiz? I hope